And we are live in the Storycraft Cafe. I'm your host, Hank Garner, and today I am super pleased to be joined by Rhett Bruno again. We did this about a week and a half ago, and something happened to Rhett's internet at the end, and we just kind of, had an abrupt end to that show, and I didn't want to leave things unsaid that we were in the middle of talking about. So Rhett has graciously agreed to join us again, and we're going to talk some more about the present state of science fiction publishing and writing and in 2023. And I know we had uh, some pretty great conversation going last time, Rhett. We were talking about audiobooks specifically, and how you guys at Athon, that's really a priority for you, developing audio and ebooks more so than print. And um, kind of compared to the way that traditional publishing has always focused on print first, and then ebooks where they like had to be dragged into ebooks, and then audio has always been this kind of niche thing off to the side. Oh yeah, we'll also do an audio book, but it's not been a priority. But we're starting to see some of those attitudes change. What do you guys think will be some of the biggest trends in 2023, or how are you seeing the industry? What do you see on the near horizon?
Yeah, so again, thanks for having me back. Sorry, everyone. We had construction and our internet likes to go out for periods of time. But yeah, I mean, audiobooks have been big from us from the start. We started like 5 years ago when Athon started, and part
Yeah.
of how we were able to start was we, teamed up with Audible Studios and got some advances for a series for by authors that helped us sort of have the money to then push and market those initial titles.
Right.
And kind of the big trend we've seen, and something we were at the forefront of, was the synchronized launch, which was kind of something that not a lot of the bigger publishers were doing, or if they were doing it, it was more for the bigger titles,
Right.
probably requested. And now you see it like almost all the time. And when we started doing that, even with Audible Studios, they were like, the studios themselves were like, just didn't know how to handle it, right? Because they were so used to getting a book that had already been out for like a year, and
Right.
every typo in the world was found, to where we were like, all right, here's the book. It comes out in 90 days. It hasn't been proofed yet because this is such a rapid style.
Yeah.
And, narrators had to get used to working through typos and stuff. So it was a learning experience, but now you see it everywhere. And I think, as far as trends, it's impossible to predict what genre trend will really pick up. During COVID, we saw the more fun, lighthearted, fast-paced type stuff, just
Yeah.
pure entertainment, take off big. And on the thing with audio is, unlike on ebook, where sort of Kindle Unlimited kind of defines which genres are popular for indies versus traditional publishing. On audio, it's kind of hard to see what's indie, what's not, and so everything
Right.
sort of gets lumped together. So there's very different markets, but I think what indies realized early on is they could request certain narrators and help build certain narrators up. And and last year we saw just an explosion of a few big names and genres kind of taking over and being the one that everybody wanted, to
Yeah.
where now there's too much stuff for them and it's all spreading back out. So I think we might see that, just more variety of narrator names up at the top. I mean, you had science fiction, R.C. Bray just owned the top. Fantasy lit RPG, it was Travis Baldry everywhere.
Right.
But as more people come to audio because it's more accessible than ever, I think you're going to see just more variety in those names up top, because there's not enough hours in the day
Yeah.
for the big name narrators to narrate everything.
Right. Did you guys have any clue that audio was going to have, this golden era that we're seeing now, or was this just an opportunity that presented itself and you guys seized upon? Like, looking back now, you're like, oh, we absolutely made the right business choice for how we want to launch Athon, and kind of um what our push and goal is going to be. Or, was it just you guys were both audiobook fans, like,
I th-
looking back now, can you tell?
I think timing wise, we got lucky. We were like when we started a year into when audio for indies especially just got really really big. So
Yeah.
we were still at the early portion of when you could just have a lot of breakout successes. But yeah, I mean, audio is super risky. It's something when we started, we were only working with partners because the costs are so high.
Right.
And as we went and we got like pretty good at selling it, we realized, well, we could produce a lot ourselves and sort of things that we have a better handle on selling, make more of them because the royalties are so much higher.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think we really did just get in at this lucky time of sort of early on in the audio phase where we're now it's so hard to become a bestseller on audio now
Yeah.
compared to even 3 years ago. And every year it just gets harder because, again, the bigger publishers are seeing it as more important. Audible is pumping more into their originals. Celebrities are doing it now. Like they created Plus, which people have a collection of stuff they can listen to for free if they subscribe, which is tough to
Right.
compete against with credits. And when that started, there were a ton of novels in it. And so for 6 months, like right as we were starting Athon Audio for real, is when Plus came out. And we, in that first 3 months, saw all our sales dip because they put like 10,000 plus free full length novels into Audible Plus. And now they've sort of backed away from that, and it's become more of a place for shorter things, celebrity things. And I think cool stuff that isn't really credit worthy, and the sales have picked back up. So there was a while there where we were real nervous that Plus was gonna sort of make it impossible to compete in audio on Audible, which in science fiction fantasy especially is where all the money is. But we were happy to see that they sort of maybe recognize that or kind of realize what they wanted Plus to be, because it
Yeah.
replaced the Audible Originals branch that they had. But yeah, I mean, we've seen all these phases of audio in just 5 years, and everything has made it harder to sell, especially if you're outside of the real hot genres, especially if your book isn't short. There's all sorts of things that can help you sell on audio where those things don't help at all on Kindle or print, and you have to kind of weigh the importance of each.
Right. um I think last time we were talking about the different markets for audiobooks that have come out, and I told you that I had Audible on my phone, obviously, and also Libro FM is another app that I have, but I only have that because HarperCollins sends me
Yeah.
audio arcs, through that, and that's the only reason that I use that app. Um, and I've been a subscriber to Audible probably 15 years now, if I had to guess. And, they take $16 out of my, bank account every month, and I get a credit that pops in, like on the 20 something of the month. And I don't even it's like I'm not even spending that money. It's just become, just part of, what goes
It's
on.
like a streamer, right?
It,
Like
it
when
is. It
when
is.
do I check my Netflix account unless someone is
Exactly.
like trying to steal the number or something?
Right, right. But I know other markets are making a push to get in. Spotify, I think, is probably one of the making the biggest noise in the area. But do you have any idea if they plan to have a subscription that includes an audiobook a month, or a plus plan? I dabble a little bit in the Audible Plus. But I don't think they've got it quite dialed in to make the app easy to use and find something. So anyway,
Yeah,
that's
I
neither
think
here nor there.
Audible forever, the website is just so much easier to navigate,
Yeah.
especially for plus stuff. We found as far as Spotify is the thing everyone's talking about. At our point, right? Because we're selling and we're producing fast, and we're releasing fast. It's just not relevant to us yet. But we've talked to some of the heads of the big audio publishers, and everyone's kind of excited about it, but no one's sure exactly what their model's going to be yet.
Right.
And I think, we're not that excited personally. Only my partner at Athon, Steve, was in music for so long, and he just saw firsthand how poorly Spotify treated music producers as far as
Right.
money. And, I don't know why they would treat authors any differently. And I know everyone, like, there's just all this stuff about the Audible 40%, but based on what those sell for and how much you can make, it seems in the end a lot better than what Spotify is giving to music producers. So,
Right.
it's who knows, and who knows what genres it'll take off in, right? Because, a lot of articles talk about wide audio and stuff, but when you really look and you talk to even a lot of our partners at the bigger audio publishers who publish everywhere, when it comes to science fiction and fantasy, which is what we do, Audible is king, and like by a massive, massive percentage. So, they are definitely focused on it. You see with the daily deals and sort of all the lists they put out, like Audible isn't treating science fiction fantasy as just another thing, right? They definitely put a lot of focus there. And Spotify probably would have an easier time if they tried to pick up on another genre and sort of take that share away from Audible. But yeah, who knows? Who knows if their model be subscription? Again, the plus thing, like the plus stuff, whether you listen to it or not, like someone is, because they're spending $100,000 a book to get these A-list narrators. So but I think that was almost necessary, because like $16 a month is kind of a lot for one credit. But then when you could also access all that stuff for free, it balances out. So
yeah,
I definitely think they needed that. Probably not when they did it, but now that Spotify and other places are starting to try to compete, that was sort of ahead of the game. But yeah, I don't know where Spotify's going to go. I don't know where all these apps are going to go.
Yeah.
I think if they try to do everything and every genre without a focus, it's going to be really hard for them to grow, just because of the convenience. Like, same thing, people read Kindle because they already had the Kindle app, where they had a Kindle and all their books moved to it, and it's just there and it's convenient. The UI is fine. And and same with Audible.
Yeah, I recently got a new Kindle Paperwhite. I had a Kindle Paperwhite that was that first generation that came out like 6 or 7 years ago, and it had just kind of gotten slow, and I had one little mar on the screen, and I got a new one, and I powered up. I put in my email address that's attached to my Amazon account, and all my books are there. Just bam, and it's just like my other one. I just pick up where I left off, and it's just,
and I think their benefit is it syncs right with Prime and delivery, and everyone orders stuff. Like, it just is all together. That's why, I mean, Spotify with music has that other thing to draw people in.
Right.
But yeah, they'll have to see if those people are really listeners to audiobooks. Right. Because as popular as audiobooks are, when you like break down the numbers of how many subscribers are, it's not like a billion people in the world, right? It's like in the tens of millions of actual book listeners in the world that are using these audiobook apps. And that's a small group of people to hit. Even if Spotify has 300 million music lovers, they might have no people who want to listen to a full book on their app. So it's just too early to tell.
Yeah. Well, as from a publisher's perspective, what do you guys think about the Plus catalog? And I have no idea how the back end for authors and publishers, how that's working. But is Is that
It's
something you
not
guys are
really
interested in,
free
or
for anyone to use.
okay,
There was sort of this idea that it was going to be like KU for audiobooks, but it's
right,
not really that. It's pretty guarded, and they've had some partnerships with some big audio publishers to put backlist stuff into that program. But I think our issue at the start of it was they were like throwing big, huge full length novels in now
yeah,
that were new and everything. And it just was like, why are people going to spend money on new credit based things when they have so much here? Now it seems they really are moving away from the novel. I think they've stopped taking as many from even the other publishers for these full length novels. And it's just a different experience. It seems more for celebrity based stuff, short stories, and that's good, right? Because
yeah,
there's never been a market really that makes a lot of money, at least for a long time, in short fiction, novellas, and all that, because everything is about value. But plus, like me and Steve's Cold as Hell and Black Badge series and all of that was born because of Dead Acre, which came out in Plus, which was a novella that in any other format would have had no chance. But Plus has sort of given the opportunity for short fiction to sell.
yeah,
And they're really, really selective, which makes it hard. That's curated editor edition, right? So just like with a big publisher, you're submitting based on that editor's taste. So it's not like anyone could just use it, but it does open up a legitimate short fiction outlet that
right,
no one is going to spend a credit on and probably not going to pay for. But if it's there, they'll listen. And, for us, it led into a grander series. And I'm sure other people have done that too. And it allows them to put bigger, cooler narrators on it because it's 3 or less hours. It's a lot cheaper than a full book.
right,
So that's a cool opportunity, right? In the end, we got an upfront payment for it and nothing else because it's free. And that payment was sort of the pro magazine short fiction rate. So they're paying fine for it. And that is a cool thing about Plus. I think that audiobooks and especially the credit system really made shorter books or shorter fiction impossible to sell. I mean, we have our biggest things that sell are like 20-hour long, huge fantasy type books, right? Like that's the type of stuff that is credit worthy in their system. And shorter 70,000 word books, which, is a normal length book in a lot of genres, just became
right,
impossible to sell. And the Plus system gives those things a chance, which is kind of cool.
yeah. You mentioned a minute ago that during COVID, people's reading taste kind of changed, or that people were buying certain books with a certain tone. How do you see the state of science fiction right now? Like where are we sitting going into 2023? The pandemic is mostly behind us, I think, and people's lives are pretty much getting back to normal. Do you see readers' taste changing again, or how do
Yeah, I
you
mean,
kind of
I think you could do dark stuff again, which
okay?
is good. Yeah, in the end, the KU, which is where we focus, and Kindle, it very much is like the movies and the fun blockbuster type stuff has the easiest route to selling because you're alienating less people with
Right.
a real high concept or something really dark or something that honestly is like a harder read, right? That maybe is more intense to read. So there's always that stuff. I think during COVID, that stuff got really, really hard to sell, and now it's getting back to normal. That
Life's getting good again, so we need to read bad stuff to balance
of,
out.
of course, like post-apocalyptic stuff always dealt with similar virus issues, but again, like you see the trends. Like for a while, even in Hollywood, it was kind of positive stuff, and now The Last of Us is the most popular thing on TV, and it's basically an epidemic-based
Yeah,
viral post-apocalyptic story. So I think we're back to where anything can sell.
yeah,
It's just that type of popcorn blockbuster fun and easy read stuff is just always easier.
Yeah.
And unlike the movies, it costs the same exact to make as the more intense dark stuff.
Yeah.
So that helps it stay on that trend of popular. But yeah, I mean, I think it really depends what kind of things you're reading, right? If you're still like reading the highbrow sci-fi publishers like Tor and stuff, you're going to get a lot of those slower, more high concept, hard sci-fi type things.
Right.
But you know, probably in those places too, the things that are making them a lot of money are Star Wars versus Star Trek, which, you know, Star Trek is really popular. It was never as popular as Star Wars for a reason,
Yeah.
because it is more techy and in more of a niche than Star Wars, which sort of appealed to anyone.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up The Last of Us. We've been watching it like everybody else has. But my son Noah got us into it, and I watched the first couple of episodes before I realized that this was an adaptation from a video game, which is exact opposite of the way that it used to work. You know, you'd have a TV show or a movie that then got a video game spinoff, and this is kind of the opposite. A similar thing happened, I think I can say, with the Black Badge series, in that it was definitely inspired by Red Dead Redemption. I'm not making a direct comparison at all, but because Red Dead Redemption was so popular, that definitely kind of opened up an audience for that sort of story. Is that a fair thing to say?
I would say it only did that because the narrator happened to be Roger Clark.
Well, that helps.
Otherwise,
That
yeah.
helps.
Otherwise, the fantasy aspect still makes it really hard to sell to traditional Western readers anyway.
Right.
But that the Roger Clark thing really helped
Yeah.
with.
But what do you think about this kind of reverse adaptation that we're seeing? Is video game or are video games kind of a place where people are discovering new things and then want to find new way? It seems completely opposite of the way that it used to be.
Well, you know, the problem has been is that video game adaptations like this have historically been really bad.
Yeah.
And this is
That's,
kind of the first time where, like, there's been ones that are decent, but I think this is the first time where it's like, and we're only 2 episodes in, but love it so far. But it's like been critically received well, fans are receiving it well, and I think, you know, I do think they always sort of choose the wrong things to adapt, right? Like adapting a shooter where the story is secondary is tough, where the Last of Us as a game is sort of filled with cutscenes and story. You know, it'd be, and it's simpler, right? So I think that adapting video games makes sense because it's a multi-billion dollar industry. They're as popular as movies, right? Like
right.
a Mass Effect TV show or movie would be huge because millions of people played that game.
Yeah.
So I think more are coming, but again, it's just about picking the right games. And I do think sometimes they're picking games based on popularity and not based on easy adaptability, where like The Last of Us is kind of just a visual story, and adapting that is a lot easier than adapting something where the story is just so secondary. So we'll see. This might help them make better decisions. And they seem to be, right? They're doing God of War, which again has, especially the newer ones, is heavy story, heavy cutscene. And, you know, I know they've been trying to make Mass Effect forever. So we'll see. It helps with anything. And our like sort of little dabble into Hollywood with Athon so far has helped us see like, if they're the more of an existing fan base you have, the easier it is to get anyone to consider making something.
Yeah. We have a question, Rhett, from Kenneth Kenway. Rhett, how do you deal with writers that take forever to submit their works? This is one of those questions because you are a publisher that we hear
he
writers, talk about the sound of deadlines flying past, and it's a funny thing, but as the guy on the other end and you have production schedules to keep up and all of that, how do you deal with the art of it all and
So he's actually one of our authors who's kind of late on edits, but I mean we're really flexible with that stuff. I mean we most authors we say, well, not like give it to us when it's ready, and most want a deadline because it helps them. So we give out. I mean, we don't get strict with our deadlines until the series is out already,
Yeah.
because then like there's just a valuable nature to having sequels come out at a certain pace. But again, if we talk to our authors and we'll get a sense of if they think they could even keep up a pace like that, or it'll be a longer period between releases ahead of time. So yeah, I mean, we're not too strict on that. We don't have to be because we're independent. The reason that stuff exists is because at like the big four, these dates have to be set a year in advance so they could prepare getting all the trade reviews and all the stuff that selling print requires. And so those dates become something that like they can't have another book that day. So everything has to be planned out. You'll see, like when you submit to a publisher, sometimes they reject you, one of these big publishers, because they don't have any slots open for that genre until 2024. And and you submit it in 2021 and you're just like, who wants to wait that long? So that's sort of where deadlines are more important. And with us, where we're indie, we could put things up next day if we really need to. So it's not as strict with us. We do just try to work closely with the authors to get a better sense of when we'll see things, because it helps us sell them.
Gotcha. I think we touched on this briefly last week when we talked, but lit RPG. I'm still trying to kind of get my brain around lit RPG, and it is such a massive seller right now, and just completely took me by surprise. Is lit RPG science fiction or fantasy or both?
It can be both. It's mostly leaning more towards fantasy,
Okay.
just as far as the more popular things. But there's nothing that says it has to be fantasy. It's just that's sort of what the market has gravitated to. And I mean, we always think about that is just that the traditional fantasy market has become so hard to sell it and so hard to get exposure in with the huge popular long TV show movie series out there, like your Game of Thrones and your Lord of the Rings and everything, that this niche has allowed stories that are fantasy with sort of a game spin on them to be seen and sell again, when previously like indie fantasy was so hard to break into, because there was just, you release your book and you're automatically 50 slots down in the bestseller in that category because it's filled with TV shows and and they're constantly like remaking a new version of each world, or they're doing more sequels, and you're just behind not only the book, but there's like multiple versions of a lot of these books, of Lord of the Rings and all those. So I do think it's allowed for sort of a new explosion of fantasy from not only these traditional sources to be told, with a spin that really gets people turning the pages, with sort of advancement and progression, which kind of feeds into people's desire to read that sort of stuff. I mean, now, like anything in science fiction fantasy, it's still a niche, right? It's not your beach summer mystery or anything like that, but it really hits what I think a lot of these science fiction fantasy readers who don't just want the dark stuff are looking for.
Yeah. Is lit RPG portal fantasy? Are we talking about like a story where we have a human protagonist that then goes into the game, or do these consist solely in the game? That kind of
It can be. I mean,
framework?
Portal Fantasy would be like a subsect of it. I think
Okay.
at the start it was a little more limited to that, but now, I mean, you'll see lit RPG where the world just has a game system in it, and that's just the world. It's not necessarily someone going into a game. What you're talking about is more isekai. But no, I don't think that that's necessary anymore at all.
Okay.
It just was it seemed based on what we saw selling 5 years ago was more popular then, but now really it can be anything. That system can exist in any sort of world.
I think of books like Ready Player One, and I understand that that's probably not, really what we're talking about when we talk about lit RPG, but I think it may be um, a bridge over to lit RPG for some people, and I think it's easy for people to comprehend that we've got a character who lives in the real world, but through this virtual reality game, he can go to this other world, and I think that's easy for people to
Yeah, I
conceptualize.
mean, I think that more falls into game lit, which is
Okay.
lit RPG usually brings more of the stats and things that a game would have.
Okay.
I mean, the problem with that comparison and
Yeah.
why you'll see readers like always complain about it is really Ready Player One is not for these readers. It's a big four trad pub, put out to everyone on shelves type of thing. Whereas lit RPG is very, very, at least right now, this is an indie genre. It's listened on Audible, it's read on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. It's so there. It's just different readerships. And while I'm sure most of those readers have tried Ready Player One, it's just a different type of feel probably. And it was so long ago. Like I know when Audible did a huge lit RPG focus page or post or email or something, it was a little bit ago. They put Ready Player One in there, and you'd see people on Reddit complaining and things that it's not. It's like
Not on
no,
Reddit.
but Audible also, whether they know what it is properly or not, they're trying to get the 20 million listeners who
Oh yeah.
are big four listeners to come over and try this new, more independent stuff. Who they won't understand the nuances of the different labels
Yeah.
on everything. And like you said, that young character going into and being in the virtual world was especially back then was sort of a big part of this genre. And who could say if that helped bring more listeners over, but that was something that is a household name that could get them interested. So marketing is always an important aspect of all of publishing.
Right.
And Audible knows what they're doing when they're doing stuff like that and grouping things together, because having that recognizable name honestly helps you get people to try out stuff they've never heard of.
Right. I get it. What do you see as a hot genre this year for under science fiction or fantasy? Do you see anything that's really kind of bubbling to the surface that might have caught you off guard, or that you find interesting that people are taking an interest in this thing?
I mean, those are always going to be the hot ones that just remain hot. I think right now, cozy,
Yeah.
which has always been like a mystery type thing,
Mm-hmm.
but more cozy fantasy and science fiction. And again, that might have been a result of how shitty the world got for 2 years.
Right.
And now, a lot more of that is just starting to come out because it takes a little bit of time. But I think that genre is going to grow large. I think in the same way, like video games always used to be about fighting and killing and battling things. And now a lot of the stuff made on Steam, like the independent stuff, is more cozy building,
Right.
farming type things. So I think that there is going to be more of a growth in that sort of stuff. If not selling more, just more people doing it.
Yeah.
And you see, Travis Baldry had Legends of Lattes, which was an absolute hit. And
Yep.
that's, I think, every time a new subgenre pops up, there's always one thing that has to sort of lead the charge,
Yeah.
and be the first big thing that sort of gets people to recognize it. And I think that book is going to help people know, like, hey, I want this sort of low stakes, cozy adventure, but in a fantasy science fiction world where I'm not used to seeing that. I'm used to seeing people stopping the end of the world. So that's the one niche I could see growing pretty big.
Yeah. Interesting. I do find it crazy to see how kind of feelings in general in society start kind of bleeding over to the the things that we gravitate toward,
Yeah.
and it's an interesting thing to, like, just from a sociological, kind of bent, to kind of watch the things people gravitate toward. Um, Another thing that I just remembered that I wanted to ask you was comic books. Um, with the Marvel franchise and DC, again trying to get their movie franchise off the ground and reboot it once again. Comic books were, as a genre, this thing that existed in the form that they created. But then made the jump to movies, and Marvel has done an outstanding job, but it's never been a concept that would translate very well to books, to and whether we're talking about print books or audiobooks, they kind of existed in this comic book form, but never really translated well to anything else. And I know that you guys at Athon are, have several projects that you've got working. Where have you cracked the code? Have you kind of figured out how to take these superhero stories and bring them into other media?
So I'll say we've done a few. It's not a market for readers that is very big. It's not big in books at all. I mean, it just isn't, and that might be because there's so much of it in other formats,
Yeah.
or it just doesn't translate well to that. I can't say why it's not. It's so big on TV, it's so big in film, it's so big in comics, but it just never. It's been enough years now where it probably should have. It's
Yeah.
never converted well to books, and that's even the adaptations, the audiobooks, and book versions of Batman, and all these things. Like, none of them really hit bestseller charts or anything, even with that big name. So the superhero genre is a very niche genre. I wrote one. It was
Yeah.
very hard to find a place to market. Steve wrote one. Again, very hard to place. So I mean, you just have to sort of go in expecting, hey, like, this might do well, but well for this genre is different than well for another genre, because it just
Yeah. Yeah.
hasn't come over. I mean, we're doing a lot, like company Athon, with comics coming up, but more the web comic side of things, which typically is more universal art, more anime style. So you'll see Epic Fan. It's not the superhero stuff that maybe DC and Marvel and Western readers are more used to. So I just don't. If that would have become popular in books, I think it would have happened by now.
Do you
Maybe it
think that
will if the films completely stopped getting made.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do those type of stories have a better chance in audio than print, or is it
No.
just
I mean,
doesn't matter?
the best-selling one we did was because it was Steve's, and he did it into Plus, where it was free and the book was short and it got tons of listeners. But that's, I think, what Plus is there for. So
Right.
stories that usually people won't try, that are great, people are willing to give a shot. But yeah, I don't know. I don't see a big turnaround for it. Again, I think maybe in like 20 years, when everyone's tired of making superhero movies and TV shows, maybe then they'll have a need for this type of content, right? Because it used to be, it was already existed in comics, so people didn't need the books. And then it's TV shows and movies. So, that people don't need to look for books for that stuff. So if it dies in popularity elsewhere, maybe in books it'll become popular. But yeah, it's small.
Gotcha. What do you have coming out that you're excited about, Rhett?
So what day is it? So on March 7th, I have a new military science fiction book called Ascendant War Hellfire coming out, that I wrote with MB Vance, who's a debut author. It's sort of, again, we were talking about dark, and in my own writing, I typically tend to lean dark. And so this is more of that darker, more serious expanse type of space opera. It's a similar sort of vein to my Circuit series. And then May 24th, I think, is book 2 in the Black Badge series by me and Jamie Castle. That that's finished finally. It'll be recorded soon. So we were behind, but we hit the dates, and those are sort of the big things we have scheduled. There's stuff behind the scenes, but that we can't talk about yet, or kind of pursuing. Like we'd love to see a Black Badge comic one day, right? Stuff like that. That who knows when it'll come to fruition. But those are the two sort of schedule releases we have. And then Athon Books, we have new releases typically every Tuesday. A couple every Tuesday, whether it's new or in a sequel, and we'll have that throughout the year.
Nice. Rhett, as someone who is a prolific writer and publisher, what do you read to recharge your batteries? And when you read for fun, where do you go?
Honestly, it's really hard to read for fun anymore. To recharge my batteries like that, I typically will go more towards TV shows because it's sort of a different experience in reading.
Right.
But I did try. I read the Tom Pelfroy biography because I never really got into nonfiction, but I thought that might help because it's so different. And that was kind of enjoyable. So I might try to read some more of that sort of stuff. Otherwise, it's a lot of reading things that come in, reading books of ours that come out just to know what's going on, reading my own stuff or Steve's stuff for editing and stuff. So I see words all day. So it is a little tough. And I enjoy audiobooks, but I struggle to listen to full ones.
Yeah.
So I more listen here and there as tests to hear how someone sounds or hear how a scene sounds, or to listen back to my own stuff to kind of get a refresher for a sequel. But yeah, reading for pleasure is tough when it's your job.
Someone asked, Rhett, have you read all of your submissions? I would imagine that you guys get so many submissions that it's tough to
we get
read through each one.
We get like probably 100 a week. So no, I'll only read the one. We have a team that'll bring stuff to us, and I'm always scrolling through the submissions to see if I see a cover letter that sounds appealing, that I say, hey, like, let's take a deeper look at this. So we're hands-on involved at every step of everything. But yeah, we can't read entire manuscripts by every author that submits to us. That there's just not enough time in the day. But that's why we've sort of spent years cultivating a team of people around us.
Yeah. Rhett, thank you for joining me again. Hold on. We have one more question from Kenneth. What's the weirdest submission you've gotten?
I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. And again, I don't know who these people's real names are, so I don't want to say exactly, but it was a very strange one that sort of had someone go back in time, and it made a very, very evil historical character into a good guy. And that one was pretty weird. We do get a lot of stuff that's just totally, totally off genre.
Yeah.
Whether it's nonfiction or stuff like that. So it's hard to say exactly because it's been a while since we had a super weird one, but I tend to, if we get one, like say, hey, Steve, like, look at this. But yeah, no, trust me, we get weird stuff. We get unformatted stuff. I get books submitted where it's literally just one paragraph and there's no breaks or anything. So
that's amazing. Oh man. Rhett, thank you for joining me again. We got to put a fine point on this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. What's the best place to find you? Is it the Athon site? Do you
my own stuff, rhettbruno.com, simple.
Okay.
Because not all my stuff is with Athon, so my
Gotcha.
personal stuff is all there. My Facebook, I'm like the only Rhett C. Bruno that writes, so it's pretty easy. Anything Athon, athonbooks.com. You can go to our Facebook page, Twitter. It's all just at Athon Books. And yeah, all that, we have our contact info, all that stuff. So that's where you could see every release.
Awesome. We'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes when I go back and fill all that stuff in. Rhett, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me, buddy.
Thank you. Have a good one.